The Occoquan Radio Podcast is a private production and is not affiliated with the town of Occoquan. Opinions expressed on the podcast are solely those of its host and guests. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 43 of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Ernie Porta, bringing you 10 to 15 minutes of irregular, unscheduled updates on things Occoquan and beyond. This episode will cover some town updates. In our history segment, discuss an Occoquan resident long ago appearing in an advertisement far afield, provide a public service announcement of sorts instead of our rumor mill shredder segment, and close with upcoming activities in town. Make sure you don't miss an episode by searching for us on the podcasting app of your choice and hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. At the council meeting on October 21st, most of the agenda consisted of two items. The first was a proposed adjustment to the sign regulations in the historic district, primarily centering on two issues. One, permitting the use of colored lights beyond the currently permitted October to February periods for up to 30 days once a year with a permit. And two, to permit businesses up to 2 A-frame signs, with one of them permitted to be off-premises, provided it does not block a sidewalk, has the written permission of the property owners, and receives a town permit. A public hearing was held on the matter, with the majority of individuals speaking in favor of the changes. Later in the meeting, the changes passed the town council unanimously. Additionally, the council reduced from 2 years to 6 months the period after which signs for closed businesses need to be removed. The second major item of discussion concerned the establishment of a possible residential parking district on River Road in response to River Road residents' complaints about illegal parking and associated activity in the area. Residents were largely opposed to the establishment of such a district, and the town council accordingly removed such a district from further consideration. Noting, however, that regulating situations where individuals own more cars than spaces that are allocated for them at a residence is typically an issue addressed by an HOA, and that the town has limited authority or ability to address such resident concerns in the absence of establishing a residential parking district. Staff will continue to search for other potential solutions. On October 23rd, I gave history tours of the town to two groups of folks from AARP. This is the second consecutive year that AARP has brought folks to town who, in addition to the tours, took time to shop and eat. I appreciate AARP for thinking of us. I also want to thank our events director, Tammy Hassett, and all the other staff and volunteers involved in our highly successful Halloween events, which included the Oxymoron Players, who provided an entertaining murder mystery in Rivermill Park on October 24th, and then our popular Halloween costume parade and contest, which took place on Saturday the 25th, which in turn was followed by an equally well-attended filming of Hocus Pocus in the park that evening. Thank you to all the folks who came out for these events. The costumes were amazing. And thank you to all the businesses and others who participated in decorating and welcoming our costumed visitors. I also want to thank those of you who were able to attend my presentation on October 28th at the Piazza entitled An Introduction to the History of Occoquan, sponsored by the Occoquan Historical Society. You are a great audience, and I hope you enjoyed it. Keep in mind that since things are closed this Tuesday for Election Day, the Town Council will be meeting on Wednesday, November 5th instead. As always, the agenda is available on the town website. Most of the time in our history segment, I discuss a significant event in the town's past. But when researching an area's history, it's not unusual to find a small item that piques one's interest and takes you down an unanticipated path. That happened recently when I ran across something about Occoquan from November 2nd of 1885 in a newspaper called The Express, from of all places, Adelaide, South Australia. The paper contained an ad for Ayer's Hair Vigor, a product that allegedly could work all sorts of wonders for various conditions, among them scalp diseases. Such conditions as dryness, brittleness, and falling of the hair, dandruff, itching, and annoying sores, the ad read, are all quickly cured by Ayer's Hair Vigor. It cured, according to the ad, Herbert Boyd, Minneapolis, Minnesota, of intolerable itching of the scalp, and J. N. Carter, Jr., Occoquan, Virginia, of scald head. The ad goes on to list others and appeared that same day in a number of papers in Australia, as part of what was clearly an international marketing blitz by Ayer's Hair Vigor out of Lowell, Massachusetts. Seeing all this, I had a number of questions. What, I wondered, was Ayer's Hair Vigor? Who was J. N. Carter, Jr. of Occoquan? I had never heard of him. And how did he end up getting associated with Ayer's? The first question, regarding Ayer's Hair Vigor, was relatively easy to find an answer to, for there is a Smithsonian entry on the product. Made by the J.C. Ayer Company of Lowell, Massachusetts, it was patented in 1868, and although the company offered a variety of health products typically referred to as patent medicines, this was the only company product that actually had a patent. It was one of the products that was advertised in the popular Ayer's American Almanac that continued to be published into the 1920s. As for James N. Carter, Jr., according to census records, Occoquan does not appear to have ever had a James N. Carter, Jr., but it did have a James Newton Carter, who was born in Occoquan on July 19, 1843, and died in town on August 22, 1923, of heart disease, and this is almost assuredly the James Carter Ayers mentions in their ad. Unlike many of Occoquan's more famous personages, the relatively unknown James Carter was not a Union man. According to Confederate service records, late in the Civil War in 1865, at the age of 22, he joined the Confederacy's 14th Battalion of Virginia Cavalry, commanded by Edgar Burroughs, which later was consolidated with the 15th Battalion of Virginia Cavalry. He no doubt was following in the footsteps of his father Samuel, who died of disease in January of 1865 as a POW of the Union Army in Elmira, New York. When his widow, Anna, this is James' widow, Anna, at age 74 in 1925, sought Confederate pension benefits, she listed as his immediate superior Colonel Mosby, presumably a reference to the famous Confederate cavalry officer John Singleton Mosby, the Gray Ghost. Whether mistaken family lore, wishful thinking, or part of the valorizing tendency of the Lost Cause mythology, this appears unlikely, as the units to which Carter belonged in 1865 do not appear to have ever been commanded by Mosby. There is, however, a James M. Carter listed among the roster of Mosby's Rangers, so who knows for sure. From the census records, it does not appear that these Carters were slave owners, and census records after the war note that James and his wife and 4 children apparently lived on Commerce Street. The records from the time did not list house numbers, so it's hard to know exactly where they lived. At the time of the 1880 census, James was a shoemaker who worked out of his own shop. Prince William County business licenses from the early 20th century do not show any James Carter operating as a shoemaker, but his 10 years younger brother Giles, had business licenses stretching from 1907 through 1925 as a merchant, seller of retail tobacco, as a butcher, as a greengrocer, and as a purveyor of general merchandise. There are records indicating that a Carter and Underwood, perhaps the famous Unionist Underwood family, were licensed undertakers, and this is almost certainly our Carter, as a business directory in 1917 listed a J. N. Carter as an undertaker, which is also the occupation listed on his death certificate in 1923. Well, now we've gone pretty far afield. The question still remains, how did James N. Carter of Occoquan, Virginia, end up in an international advertisement in Australia for Ayer's Hair Vigor? Business records and the census data do, in fact, offer a potential explanation. A business directory from 1917, as well as the census from 1900, list James N. Carter of Occoquan as a barber. We can probably never know for sure, but what seems most likely is that sometime between 1880 and 1885, James N. Carter became a barber, and Ayer's Hair Vigor made its way into his shop in Occoquan, Virginia. And whether through volunteered information about it relieving his scalded scalp, or perhaps some sort of offered financial incentive, his name, and Occoquan's, were included in an advertisement that went at least halfway and maybe all the way around the world. James N. Carter is buried in Prince William County in a private family cemetery off the Prince William County Parkway. The transcribed online entry for his name mistakenly lists his middle initial as M, but the headstone is clear: James N. Carter, July 19, 1843 to August 22, 1923. I encourage everyone who is interested in learning more about Occoquan history to visit Occoquan's Millhouse Museum and consider joining the Occoquan Historical Society. You can find more information at www.occoquanhistoricalsociety.org. This would normally be the time of our Rumor Mill Shredder segment, but this week I'm going to fill it with a public service announcement of sorts. Someone recently inquired about food banks given the government shutdown and the high number of furloughed workers in our area. There are a number of such food banks, but the one with which I am the most familiar is the Hunger Prevention Center associated with ACTS of Prince William. I have served on the board of directors of ACTS for a number of years now, and July 1 of this year started my term as its board chair. ACTS is a more than 50-year-old organization. It's a 501c3 nonprofit that provides emergency and transitional housing, emergency utility assistance, and domestic violence and sexual assault services. We also operate our Hunger Prevention Center food bank at 3901 Axe Lane in Dumfries, with hours that vary by day. Donations are taken at our facility at 17958 Dr. David Klein Lane in Dumfries, also with varied hours. So if you would like to register as a client or donate food items, which is very much needed, please go to www.actspw.org. Again, that's www.actspw.org for more information. I also want to mention that several groups are collaborating in town for a Thanksgiving food drive from now through November 26th. Curate at 302 Mill Street is hosting an initiative that involves partnering with VFW Post 7916, who is serving as a collection point, Wiener Realty Group, who is collecting donations and supplying insulated bags for the meal kits, and Hello Jackson, who is offering a free mini room spray to donors. Now for upcoming events. The featured artist at the Loft Gallery this month is Karen Cebulka, whose memories in watercolor include paintings inspired by the nature and culture of places she has lived and visited. There will be a Meet the Artist reception for Karen on November 8th from 1 to 4. Glory B will be holding an open house all day on November 7th. And Laura Jones Art Gallery will also be having painting classes on November 6th and 8th. For information on these and other events in Occoquan, go to www.visitoccoquanva.com/events. Again, that's www.visitoccoquanva.com/events. That brings us to the end of this episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. Make sure you don't miss an episode by searching for us on the podcasting app of your choice and hitting the subscribe button. I'm your host, Ernie Porta. Thank you for listening.